Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Hi, I'm Josh Levin, and this is Hang Up and Listen for the week of July 8th, 2024. On this week's show, we'll talk about Klay Thompson's move from Golden State to Dallas and whether there will ever be another NBA dynasty again. We'll also check in on the state of sports media TV rights, which are getting scrambled and streamed up the wazoo. And finally, we'll welcome the newest official members to college sports' mega conferences now that Texas and Oklahoma are for real in the SEC and Oregon, Washington, UCLA, and USC are joining Rutgers in the Big Ten. I'm in Washington, D.C. I'm the author of the book The Queen and the host of an upcoming slow burn season on the rise of Fox News. Stefan Fatsis is off today, but he'll be back next week to celebrate whoever wins the Euros and Copa America and sing some kind of Greek song to celebrate Giannis's victorious entree into the Olympic basketball tournament. With me, as always, from Palo Alto is Slate's three-time slow burn host, emotional investment columnist, and honorary member of the Houston Tourism Board, Joel Anderson. Hello, Joel.
Tough sell this weekend, but we'll be back. I mean, apparently we're going to get hit with hurricanes every year from here on out. So anyway, you know,
add that pull quote to the Flyers, baby. I love it.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you can't go down there and have some good barbecue, brother. Or some Tex-Mex, you know what I mean? So, but anyway, good to see you guys.
Good to see you. Also with us this week is the editor-at-large of The Ringer, the co-host of the indispensable Press Box podcast, and the greatest living sports media critic from the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. It's our friend, Bryan Curtis. Hello, Bryan.
Member of the North Texas Tourism Bureau, I'll have you know.
I was trying to stoke some rivalry here, but it seems like you guys are just being on very friendly terms at the moment.
I lived in Carrollton. It was lovely. Carrollton, Texas, for people that they not know. It was fine.
There we go.
Totally fine.
We can be friends today.
Yeah. Well, let's just wait until we get through all the segments first, because we have to talk about Texas first. So, yeah.
There's a rocky road ahead. I see the Mavericks. I see Texas. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, here we go.
Now, as always, we want to thank our Slate Plus members for making this show possible. And in this week's bonus episode, we'll be pondering NBC's creation of an AI Al Michaels voice, which will deliver us highlights of the Paris Olympics. We'll perhaps also be pondering our own mortality. But to find out, you need to be a Slate Plus member. If you don't subscribe, there are two ways for you to hear it. You can either subscribe right now by going to Apple Podcasts and clicking Try Free at the top of our show page, or visit slate.com/hangup+ to get access wherever you listen.
On January 29th, 2013, the Golden State Warriors went into a road game against the Cleveland Cavaliers without three starters, including Steph Curry, who was out with an ankle injury. As it happened, second-year shooting guard Klay Thompson was primed to have the best game of his young career that night. Here's a clip from near the end of the game.
Our player of the game, little doubt, Klay Thompson, put on a shooting exhibition. 6 of 8 outside the arc.
Did he ever?
En route to 13 of 24 overall shooting.
He finished with 32 points that night, and a few months later, Warriors coach Mark Jackson called Curry and Thompson the greatest shooting backcourt in the history of the game. And while it might have seemed like hyperbole at the time, Curry and Thompson went well beyond that in proving their old coach right. They combined to rewrite their NBA record books, setting a number of marks for threes by a pair of teammates. They each won the three-point contest, and together with Draymond Green, they won 4 titles and appeared in 6 finals over 13 seasons. Their run will go down in history as one of the best in the league. And now it's all over. Last week, Thompson went to the Dallas Mavericks as part of a sign and trade deal that included a 3-year, $50 million contract. So, Josh, when we were talking offline about this move last week, you actually called ESPN's TikTok about Thompson deciding to leave the Warriors and going to Dallas strangely moving. What's up with that? What are you talking about?
Yeah, maybe emphasis on strangely. Like, I wasn't expected to be moved by Ramona Shelburne's reporting on why Klay left the Warriors. But Klay has always been a very kind of gnomic figure. I mean, even to his teammates, they talk about how he's somebody who's kind of impossible to know. And just from reading this story, there's some moments in there where, I mean, this is obviously an incredibly rich and famous and successful professional athlete, but I think we could all maybe recognize just someone reaching a point of self-knowledge, and he was miserable with the team. He felt disrespected, and he was trying to kind of recreate a version of himself in this team that existed prior to his 2 season-ending injuries and prior to Draymond Green punching Jordan Poole. And he just realized, Bryan, I think in the last few months, that it wasn't going to be possible to recreate what they had. And the thing that someone in midlife or late in life in NBA terms, needed to do was leave and find a new challenge. And he explained all of this to his teammates and his coach, and it seemed like they understood. And for me, that is kind of moving in a world of second aprons and of, CBAs, and where, we see Joe Montana playing for the Chiefs. There's something very kind of mundane and not new at all about this, but still this struck me with a force that I wasn't expecting.
I agree. Those I always call those stories that come out the moment some big NBA trade happens or the moment a team loses in the first round of the playoffs, then now they tell us stories, because clearly the sports writers have been squirreling away all these acorns, and they're going to push send, they're going to push publish right at the moment. But the Klay ones, and there were several, if I'm not mistaken, one in The Athletic, one in ESPN, the details were fascinating because there was a lot of frustration with him, right? Getting put on the bench late in games for Golden State the last couple of years. But then also, as you say, this kind of interesting tango where it's like, no, Steph, don't go to management and demand that they re-sign me, because if you do that, they might actually re-sign me. I don't necessarily want that. They were just real subtle relationships and sort of power dynamics that you don't often see in those stories, which are usually about somebody just getting angry and saying, hey, I want a new start. I want to go somewhere else.
Yeah, it must have been really tough because, the understanding is that Klay took less money to go to Dallas. And you can kind of understand how that might happen, because if you feel like the franchise that you've made your name with and helped, win 4 titles and play in 6 finals with doesn't want you back, like you might be more willing to take less money from somewhere else and get started somewhere else, right? As opposed to coming back to a franchise that you think that doesn't quite feel the same way about you. And it's actually, I was thinking about this last night. I was like, it's kind of hard for me to admit this, given the hell that the Warriors gave my Rockets in the middle of that dynasty, but I've lived in the Bay since 2015. So that means I've been here for most of that Warriors dynasty. And I'm kind of sad too to see it end. I don't, it's not that I wanted to see the Warriors fans happy or anything, or that I wanted to see the, Golden State win another championship, but it is kind of an end of an era. Like and we've been talking about this for a while, like seeing LeBron get old and Kevin Durant get old. And you're just like, oh, okay, the generation of players, for this, I guess dating back to like 2003, they're kind of getting older, man, and they're moving on. And, this is just sort of the final nail in that. Like, that Boston Celtics team that won the NBA championship, Josh, like that's not of that previous generation. This is you can just kind of see the younger guys starting to take over. And, that's why I think actually, strangely enough, the Olympics is going to be strangely emotional, kind of seeing Bryan and Steph and KD and all those guys together. Cause you kind of know that, like all things, the good things are kind of coming to an end.
Yeah. I was thinking the exact same thing about the Olympics and these videos that came out over the weekend of all of the guys at Vegas training camp, like dapping each other up and hugging each other. And it's funny, like we don't think of the 2024 Olympic team as being, as full of old guys as maybe the Bird Magic 92 Dream Team, where they were kind of full of what seemed like these ceremonial positions. But these guys are fucking old. Like they're as old, or maybe older than the old
they're
guys.
Older than that old Dream Team.
Yeah, they're older than that old Dream Team. And so this is kind of a last hurrah. I'm fascinated to see how it plays out and how like Anthony Edwards fits into this team. But back to the Warriors, I mean, you have Steve Kerr saying it's bizarre that Klay won't be there. Steph Curry saying that it sucks. And just the way that the NBA financial system works, like Jordan Poole had to get that big extension because his contract was up. And like they chose maybe to extend Draymond instead of Klay, but Klay was coming off of these 2 injuries. And so there's just a way that sentimentality can't be part of an equation, even if maybe the fans, I don't know, Bryan, would the fans be happier to see this group go out as Warriors versus seeing the team get, DeAnthony Melton and Kyle Anderson and guys that like might actually be better pieces now than Klay Thompson? But like, is that what anyone wants?
It's a fascinating question. I think most fans actually don't know what they want. We've seen this play out on a message board or on a sports radio call where at the one time you're like, we got to keep the band together. This is meaningful, right? This is bigger than about winning a championship next year, which the Warriors probably aren't going to do anyway. But at the same time, no, we got to be a smart franchise, right? Player gets old, he's out, we got to move on. It's funny, when I first saw this news, I sent one of my friends a picture of Emmitt Smith wearing a Cardinals jersey. And hopefully it's not as tragic as that little mini episode of NFL Time, but it just felt weird like that, right? Like I can't imagine just seeing this combo of player and uniform.
I mean, Joel, this is a team that missed the playoffs last year. They lost in the play-in to the Kings, who in turn lost in the play-in to the Pelicans. And the Pelicans got swept by the Thunder. I mean, like the kind of nesting dolls there show how far away the Warriors are for actual contention. So like what you're preserving here is like a museum. It's not a present day contender.
Yeah, I think, kind of following as many Warriors fans as I do and knowing them, like they, Klay was miserable, but they've been miserable too. And I really trace it all the way back to that punch, the Draymond punch and Jordan Poole. Like the dynasty of the Warriors ended that day. Like it just has not been the same team. Like the vibes were all different. You can just see that there was a lot more inner turmoil and it didn't really translate on the court like they've been, like you said. I mean, they were a team that got knocked out of the play-in round last year. So, I'm thinking about what you said about like what would fans want. It doesn't seem like Warriors fans were getting a lot out of this recent iteration of the Warriors, even though it had a lot of the same guys that were there for the glory days. So I can imagine like as long as the Warriors attempt to become competitive again, and maybe they'll get Lauri Markkanen or whatever in a trade down the road here or something, and maybe that will, boost their fortunes. But it just kind of seems like I think everybody knew that it was time to move on. And in that way, I'm sort of impressed that Klay was like, you know what? Let's go ahead and do that. Even if it means that I'm going to be, we're going to flood Twitter with Akeem and Raptors jerseys, memes, or, Patrick Ewing and Magic jersey, memes, you know what I mean? Cause I mean, inevitably that's what it's going to be. And I mean, we can talk about Dallas, Bryan, but like, I mean, maybe Klay will mean something for those Mavs, but I mean, the odds are usually when you get a guy this late in his career and they're moving on, like you don't think that he's going to be doing that much for you guys, right?
I mean, the difference between all the teams and players that you guys have mentioned, the Emmitt, Ewing, Akeem, is that Klay is going to an actual contender. Like he's not going to an expansion team or a downtrodden franchise that's just looking for a bump in ticket sales. Like the Mavericks made the finals and they had a problem with not having enough shooting. And now they have Klay Thompson. And so the idea behind this is we have a missing piece that could help us win a championship. That might be far-fetched, but he's not being brought in as like a hood ornament or something. He's being brought in to play a key role. And I would also say that the collective bargaining agreement is in large part responsible for the Warriors dynasty existing in the first place, because there was that bump, that 1 year bump in the salary cap that was anomalous and allowed them to get Kevin Durant. And, Bryan, we wouldn't be in this moment either if the Warriors had just cut Draymond Green after he punched Jordan Poole. I mean, maybe the Warriors dynasty would have ended there, but they probably would have kept Klay Thompson. There would have been more cap space for him.
Totally. And, it was funny just thinking, reading all those, now they tell us stories about Klay, you're reminded about so many strange moments that got the Warriors to where they are. You mentioned the Draymond punch obviously being the big one, but then those 2 Klay injuries, one in the finals and one off the court, right? One, or not off the court, but away from an NBA court. And how everything combines, almost like you could see the chapters in a book about the Warriors dynasty going up and going down, all combined to get us where we are today.
I think the last thing we should hit is sort of playing off of Bryan's point about fans not knowing what they're doing. Do we think the NBA knows what it's doing? We're in the longest stretch, I think, in NBA history, at least in modern history, of non-repeat champions. So sports leagues talk about wanting parity and wanting fans in every market or as many as possible to feel like they have a true chance at contention. That had never really been the case with the NBA until now. So maybe that's a success. But, we know that fans, what they actually want in terms of tuning in and watching games in large numbers is the LeBron Miami Heat. They want the Lakers versus the Celtics. They want consistent rivalries and they want super teams. But this new collective bargaining agreement with the hilariously named second apron, with the kind of punitive rules that seem like similar in some ways to like what happens if you lose your fantasy league. It's like, we're going to take away your 2032 draft pick or like put it at the end of the first round. I mean, these are things that are that have never really happened in the NBA before. Like, they are really coming within like a scintilla of having a hard salary cap with the second apron rules. And what it's doing is it's breaking up the Warriors. It's kind of enforcing parity from on high in a way that we really haven't seen before. And so I guess the question to you, Joel, is this what the NBA wants? Are these unintended consequences? Does the NBA not actually know what it wants, or will it regret what these rules are requiring teams to do?
I guess we'll just kind of learn down the road here, because I'm not sure. Because I remember, like, in, the age of fan that I am, is I remember that teams would come back year after year after year. Like the old Utah Jazz of the 90s, the Stockton Malone guys, or the old, Portland Trailblazers, or the old Seattle Supersonics. And like, they would compete every year, and maybe they didn't get over the hump, but, they tinker a little bit around the edges of their roster. And they would do that. And like, for whatever reason, we've seen in this next generation that players and front offices are not willing to wait anymore. And so this is sort of a way to sort of mix things up and enforce a sort of parity. But I mean, will fans want to see that? Well, this is one of the Boston Dallas NBA finals was one of the lowest rated NBA finals in recent memory. Like, and I don't know if that's because, neither of these teams had a superstar. I mean, I guess Luka is a superstar, but I don't, we didn't have a domestic home. So I don't know what that was about, but for whatever reason, it did not catch on with the fans. The finals was not very good and people didn't really seem to take to it. So I mean, I guess the early returns suggest that fans are a little lukewarm to the idea of not having a big dog or a dynasty, a team that's in the middle of a dynasty.
What I would say, Bryan, is that what we've never seen before is a team and the players on that team wanting to stay together and rules forcing them to break apart, which, like, the Celtics now are going to have Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum on these enormous contracts, and there's just no way to keep the band together, even if they wanted to.
And their owner's like, let me sell the team in order to celebrate winning the title. I agree. It reminds me a little bit of early 2000s NFL, and salary cap had come in 93, 94. And all of a sudden, the Cowboys dynasty had petered out. The Niners dynasty had petered out. Elway won those couple titles. And we were looking at that landscape where it was like, oh my gosh, the Ravens are going to win a Super Bowl. That really random Bucks team is going to win the Super Bowl. The first Patriots team, which seemed pretty random when they won the Super Bowl and beat the Rams. Similar non-sort of dynasty, a lot of teams winning titles. Well, look what happened, right? The Patriots then wind up winning 6 Super Bowls. The Chiefs now have reasserted themselves. So I wonder if we look back at this conversation in 2 or 3 years and heaven forbid the Celtics run off a couple of titles right here, or the Nuggets get their act together and win another title. We're like, actually, that wasn't the end of dynasties.
Right.
It was just that the teams had established themselves, were ready to win some more.
Brian, you know what's going to happen? We're going to look up in 4 or 5 years and they'll be like, oh, we forgot about Wemby and the Spurs. You know what I mean? Like that could be the dynasty right there, right? Like, I mean, because the thing is, if you have a truly transcendent player, it's really hard to hold them down. Like, eventually they get 1 or 2, and like, I mean, for all the things that they can do around the salary cap or whatever, like a generational player is still going to probably knock off a couple championships. So that, I think that'll probably be what happens more than likely.
Which is the oldest story in the NBA, right? You get the player, and then you build around the player, and you win championships eventually.
In the next segment, we're going to talk about what's up with the future of sports media.
This This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Let's face it, sometimes multitasking can be overwhelming. Like when your favorite podcast is playing and the person next to you is talking and your car fan is blasting, all while you're trying to find the perfect parking spot. But then again, sometimes multitasking is easy, like quoting with Progressive Insurance. They do the hard work of comparing rates so you can find a great rate that works for you, even if it's not with them. Give their nifty comparison tool a try, and you might just find getting the rate and coverage you deserve is easy. All you need to do is visit Progressive's website to get a quote with all the coverages you want, like comprehensive and collision coverage or personal injury protection. Then you'll see Progressive's direct rate, and their tool will provide options from other companies all lined up and ready to compare, so it's simple to choose the rate and coverages you like. Press play on comparing auto rates. Quote at Progressive.com to join the more than 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy. If there's one thing sports fans love as much as watching games, it's talking about them, especially the stats. Here's one that's super simple to remember. Discover automatically doubles the cash back on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cash Back Match. That means with Discover, you could turn $150 cash back to $300. That's right. You could put it towards some memorabilia you've had your eye on, or treat yourself to a premium sports network. You earn and Discover doubles. See terms at discover.com/credit card. Early last month, the Wall Street Journal reported that the NBA was close to making an 11-year, $76 billion media rights deal with ESPN, NBC, and Amazon, and not with Turner Sports, which has broadcast games since 1984 and has been the longtime home of Charles Barkley and TNT's Inside the NBA. That deal has still not yet been made official for some reason, but Turner has announced that it's bought a chunk of the college football playoff from ESPN, among other acquisitions. The NFL is also putting games on Netflix this Christmas, it announced. And also, by the way, Diamond Sports Group, which runs a network of regional channels, is currently in U.S. bankruptcy court, throwing its portfolio of hockey, baseball, and basketball local media rights into disarray. Bryan, out of everything that's gone down over the last couple of months, what has stood out to you?
The Turner implosion really is number one, and you're right, it's slow motion. We've had a emergency addition to the press box. The NBA media rights are announced behind glass for like 3 weeks now, which may get crowded out by the Joe Biden emergency press box that we're also waiting to record. So just a little behind the scenes podcasting talk there.
Do you have any sense of why it hasn't been announced yet?
I just think, they wanted to wait until after the finals. And then also, there's a lot of
Do you think Adam Silver was one of the people who didn't watch the finals, so he thinks it might still be going on?
It might still be going on. He might have tuned out. Also, there's all this legal mumbo jumbo, which I don't want to get too deeply into, but Turner is trying to hold on to the NBA rights. And the NBA doesn't want to announce this and then wind up in court for months and months and start a new rights deal by, having their old partner hanging on by its fingernails. But I think, look, for people like us who have our generation, you're seeing an end of, the virtual end anyway of Turner Sports, which has been a really cool part of our lives in a lot of ways. We talked to Levin a lot, talk about Inside the NBA, about Charles Barkley. It's about to be a new era. I mean, I get all the press releases, and the one I just got was Turner Sports signs Mountain West football. Like that is what the future looks like. It's not the conference finals. It's not the Inside the NBA with Kenny the Jet and Barkley. It's that. And that might not really exist as a channel in the same way, especially with the media universe changing like it is.
Well, let me ask you this, Bryan. Like, do you think people actually care whether or not TNT broadcast the games? Like, let's say they were able to transport Inside the NBA to, wherever those next few games are going to be broadcast, NBC or whatever. Do you think that that would prevent people from following up? And I should add the caveat here that Charles Barkley said that he's going to retire. Like, if TNT loses games, he's not going to be there, right? Maybe that's just a negotiating tactic, right? But I mean, I grew up watching NBA games on CBS, and then it was on NBC, and now it's on TNT, and it's just like, I mean, the games are going to be the games, right?
Yes, I agree. And, you see all this NBA on NBC nostalgia now. And I'm like, I think the things we're nostalgic about, Bob Costas, Marv, they're all Michael Jordan, right? They have all either retired or moved on to new jobs. No, I completely agree. I think, but inside the NBA is, I think, a particular concoction of Turner Sports in a period of time. Charles Barkley, when he retired, interestingly, didn't go to NBC because he thought it was too straight-laced. He thought he could be himself on cable television. And also, I think what you're seeing, Joel, maybe is kind of the end of cable. And maybe that's just a nostalgic thing. We'll all watch streaming. It doesn't really matter. We'll find the NBA games wherever they are. But there is a particular, I don't know if the word is aesthetic, thing that was cable television. And whether it's 90 Sports Center, whether it's inside the NBA that you could do there that felt different than what they were doing on the networks. And I think that's coming to an end as well.
It's funny when you think about it. It's kind of impossible to even say why a particular channel or network would matter to a fan. Marv and Costas could have been on any network. They just happened to be employed by NBC at the moment. Is it the, round ball rock? Is it the graphics? Yes. Is it the graphics package? Is it the sense memory of me putting the channel 4 into my remote as a child? I guess that's all part of it, but I think you're onto something there, Joel, that, we adjust way more quickly than we think we're going to. And it now seems totally bizarre that the NBA was on CBS when the NBA on CBS was the thing for Lakers Celtics. That was where you would watch those games.
Do you know what the biggest disruption to my TV habits were as a sports fan ever? Was when I realized that Monday Night Football had moved to cable. And I was just like, what? It's not on ABC anymore. What the hell is going on? It was a big, I'm not saying I'm old, but I remember the tail end of the Howard Cosell era on TV, right? And it coming on there. And I'm like, man, they moved this to cable. But then we all just kind of got used to it, right?
We do. Yeah. And like I said, I think the interesting part too, looking forward is what it looks like in terms of what the talent, where it disperses. Charles Barkley. Charles Barkley, if we did a Rushmore of guys who have ever been on sports TV, Cosell's probably on it, Madden's probably on it, and Charles Barkley's probably somewhere on it.
Who's number 4,
just
Bryan?
In terms of people.
You can't 3 Rushmore us.
Ooh. Oh my God, a 3 Rushmore. Who would be the fourth guy on that? Who's bigger than life and extends way out, anybody who doesn't even watch sports knows who they are.
I don't think you can add Barkley on that list because Barkley actually has had multiple shows on CNN that nobody watched. Right?
Those aren't sports shows.
Penalizing him for that.
Yeah,
Howard Cosell had a Saturday Night Live style show in the 70s too that nobody liked. But
Is Vin Scully the 4th?
Ooh,
he might be. I mean, if we did it right now, don't you think of do you recognize these people? He would, or recognize this name. He would definitely be up there.
That's probably right. But yeah, I definitely think that if Barkley were to go to some network, and hopefully he will, I hope he'll reconsider his, because again, for a lot of us, we're probably more invested inside the NBA than we are any particular game. Oftentimes I will stay up late just to see their reaction to games rather than the games themselves. So I think that if he comes along for the ride wherever they go, then maybe they have a chance of salvaging it. But again, they'll build some other personality. They'll build, I don't know who's next. I mean, obviously it's not going to be JJ Redick, but they'll build around some other, former player personality, and we'll all sort of move on. I remember I was thinking this weekend, I was looking for, man, where are they showing the Euro Cup on? What channel? And I'm just me and my dad are where's the Olympic trials? What channel is that showing on? And you just kind of as a sports fan now, you get used to the idea that you don't know where the hell a game is showing. You just start going looking for it, and then you end up finding it, right?
I think Joel does bring up a good point, which is regular season basketball, despite all of us at the Ringer tweeting about it all the time, is not actually watched by very many people at all, which is a very funny irony that the networks are about to give $7 billion to the NBA for this. And when you talk about inside the NBA, whatever it is, on whatever streaming platform or network it's on, you're going to have to build some kind of show that's going to get you to watch, because right now people aren't watching the games in huge numbers. They're just not. They're not interested in tuning in for that.
I mean, what the WNBA shows this year, particularly the Caitlin Clark games, is that the concept of appointment viewing for regular season sports is not entirely dead yet. You need someone new. You need someone transcendent, something that people haven't seen before. And maybe just that's where the growth is in women's sports, and everybody is more just kind of jaded or cynical, or is just seen it all in the NBA at this point. And so it's just the bar for storylines is higher. But I also wanted to talk about the business aspect of this, because, with the $76 billion figure that I quoted, with, the NFL's deals through 2033 are $100 billion. And then with all of the streaming services, particularly jumping all over themselves to get on board with the NFL, but also Amazon with the NBA, it just feels like sports is continuing to, I don't know if it's prop up, but it's like the last remaining thing that anyone wants to watch. And so I'm curious for both of you guys, maybe you could go first, Joel. It's just like, is the next big shift actually not going to be stuff going to streaming, but is it going to be streaming completely cratering? Because these are billion-dollar losing businesses. And then what happens then? What happens to sports and these deals then?
Josh, I was shocked because and Bryan has been been covering this longer than we have, but I was $76 billion. Where's this money coming from? I didn't know that these people had that kind of money to spend on these sort of packages. I know that live sports are pretty much the only thing that count as appointment television that, people watch en masse anymore. Right. But
and as Bryan was saying, people don't actually watch. That many people don't watch. I mean, that's the point, is people aren't really watching the regular season NBA, but they're watching it more than they're watching a lot of other things.
It seems like an over-leveraged bet. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me that they're spending this, but maybe I'm going to be proven to be wrong and people will flood back and watch these games in numbers that they haven't been thus far, or maybe they'll figure out the ways to monetize this, Bryan. I don't know what the bet is here.
Well, there's two different sort of interlocking stories here. One is the streaming companies, which right now just have, if they're not making money, right, have money to spend. We could add Netflix just spent $5 billion for Monday Night Raw. Speaking of live things that are like sports that they're showing. But the second thing is this is different than those rights negotiations like the one Joel's talking about from 2005, where Monday Night Football moves from ABC to ESPN. The idea now is, if you don't land the sports package, as overpriced as it may be, you don't exist anymore. Oof. You just don't exist, right? Cable operators say, you know what, TNT, we're putting you on a different tier, right? You're not in basic cable anymore, or people aren't buying basic cable at all, and you have to find a way to sell TNT to them. So if we don't have this thing, again, whatever crazy monetary bet this is, we might just not exist as a channel. That is what they feel, and that, by the way, may be the case. I mean, look at the networks right now. Would they exist without football? To what extent would they? To show George Stephanopoulos interviewing Biden? I mean, I don't know what the argument really is for a lot of these places.
And also, I mean, if you look at these reports that come out periodically about just how many billions of dollars, for instance, Peacock is losing. And the bet here is, we'll put an NFL playoff game here. We'll put, the Premier League. We'll put a bunch of Olympic stuff, and people will join and will sign up, which they do to some degree. But, would you bet on Peacock existing in 3 to 5 years? I mean, it just seems like it can't possibly continue. And so many of these streaming services can't continue on the path that they're doing. Like so many other, startups with venture money or however they're funded. It's just it's a model that's just feels inevitable that it's going to implode. And then from our own parochial point of view, it's yeah, maybe then, Joel, if you're sitting with your dad and you're where do I find this thing? Maybe you can't find it anywhere, or maybe these rights deals that are just keep going up and up and up. Maybe that just doesn't happen anymore. Maybe this bubble will finally burst and salary caps go down. And all of these different effects happen, given that these leagues are basically entirely financed by TV and streaming money.
Well, isn't that why the Boston Celtics, we haven't heard the reasons why the Celtics owner is trying to sell that franchise, but isn't that kind of let me get out of this now while they're getting as good? The Celtics are never going to be worth more money, theoretically, relative to other sports franchises, because it's just I mean, I think all of them are sort of concerned about like what these media rights deals are going to look like in the future. And I mean, $76 billion is great, but I just can't imagine that in 2032 that these deals are going to look like they make a lot of sense. And especially with like the regional channels, like all falling apart now too. Like I think for a few years in Houston, like you could not watch the like maybe it was the Rockets or the Astros. You could not watch them on local TV because like they had a problem with like the local operator there. So I just also looking at trends, like the younger generation of kids, they don't watch sports as much as our generation does, right? And so it seems like we're really moving into some trends that suggest that these deals are not going to make a lot of sense when we look back on them in a decade.
I would just say to Josh's point, are you betting on Peacock? Well, maybe, but are you betting on TNT with its Charmed reruns and, Star Wars movies that last 3.5 hours because of the commercials? I mean,
Charmed's a good show.
Are you betting on NBC? Like, the betting pool is pretty lousy right now.
Up next, welcoming Texas to the SEC with open arms and horns probably pointed down.
In 1978, gay people in California faced a dire threat.
Proposition 6, the Briggs Initiative.
The teaching profession is riddled with the homosexual element.
John Briggs is going to fire every gay and lesbian school teacher in the state of California.
I'm Christina Cauterucci. This season on Slow Burn, we'll explore how a nationwide backlash against gays and lesbians led to a massive showdown in California.
This was tens of thousands of pissed off gay guys and lesbians roaring down Market Street.
With so much at stake, young people became activists.
We've got to fight back. We can't let this happen in California.
And activists became leaders.
My name is Harvey Milk, and I'm here to recruit you.
Slow Burn, Season 9, Gays Against Briggs. Listen to the whole season now, wherever you get your podcasts.
Last week kicked off a whole new era of college sports when the University of Texas and the University of Oklahoma officially became the newest members of the SEC, the Southeastern Conference. Accepting those bids means the return of rivalries that were lost due to the waves of realignment over the past 30 years. So now we'll regularly get to see Texas versus Arkansas, Oklahoma versus Missouri, and maybe most notably, Texas versus Texas A&M. On the other hand, those moves meant the collapse of the Pac-12 and the depreciation of the old Big 12, which was already kind of an awkward marriage of the old Southwest Conference and the Big 8. But you, Bryan, in 2011, you wrote, and this is the year after Texas A&M left the Big 12 for the SEC, you wrote for Grantland about that oh so annoying SEC chant. And I'm going to quote you here from that piece. As a college football fan, there's nothing worse than hearing SEC, SEC, and realizing with a mix of hate and envy that they're not talking about you. So, Bryan, as a Texas alum, or in Texas, we call them Texas X's, right? You're free to join in on those SEC chants as often as you want now. So how does it feel?
Dear God, this is really a moment I hadn't counted on reckoning with today. Both the whole SEC chant part and having something quoted to me that I didn't remember at all. We've all reached that part in our writing careers, haven't we?
Speaking of things that don't exist anymore, Grantland, RIP.
Yeah, there you go. It's really weird. I've been looking at the schedule like everybody else because it's July and it's officially football season. I'm like, oh, wait, Texas is playing Georgia. Yeah. And that's not a one-off. That's a conference. Texas is playing Florida this year. You mentioned the return of rivalry games. Arkansas and A&M plus Oklahoma still on the schedule. Texas is playing Mississippi State this year, and that's like a normal thing now. It's weird. I don't know enough about soccer to really cinch in the Premier League metaphor here, but it just sure feels like every week there's a big brand versus brand matchup in the SEC, and often cases one that you didn't really know was on the board anytime soon.
I thought what you were going to say is that Texas got promoted and like Oregon State got relegated. I thought that was going to be Premier League analogy, but, congratulations on getting your own sub board on Tiger droppings for Texas. That's a big moment for you.
Thank you.
But, it kind of clicked in for me when we were talking in the last segment about what actually matters with CBS versus NBC versus TNT. Like, being in the SEC does actually matter. Like, if anything matters in sports and in sports fandom, and especially as we've been kind of talking about this transition in college sports, but we're actually talking about college football. If anything matters in college football, it is this branding. It is these conference affiliations. And, USC and UCLA, among others, to the Big Ten, that matters. Like, these are the associations, Joel, that you have from your childhood that you do remember and you do care about and have profound feelings over. And so it is destabilizing. It scrambles up everything. And it, like Bryan was saying, it's still, even though it just became official this week, I think it'll probably take several years for it to feel real and normal.
So I'm one of the last people in the world that cared about Arkansas that didn't go to Arkansas, like as a football program. I grew up following the Southwest Conference. Like, I watched the Raycom network every Saturday, right? So you'd watch, JJ Joe versus Zebby Lethridge or somebody like that, right? And
add Raycom to our
laughing in recognition. JJ Joe, my God.
Yeah, JJ Joe.
Add Raycom to our graveyard of
I know, right?
references today.
Yeah, and so the reason it really meant something to me is that, my freshman year of college football happened in 1996 when TCU and SMU and Rice had all gotten relegated to the WAC, right? Like, that was the first year after the Southwest Conference. And I just remember us sitting in the locker room talking about, hey, what would it take for us to win the national championship? Which was sort of absurd anyway, because it was TCU in the mid 90s. Like, we were not in danger of winning a national championship, but we were thinking about, man, will we play like BYU and we played Steve Sarkisian that year, actually, when he was a quarterback at BYU, or Utah or like Wyoming. And it was just like, oh, we're never going to win the national championship and nobody cares about us. And quickly, just that quickly, like, whereas the major newspapers in Texas covered all your games on a Saturday, it's just like, oh, your games kind of get relegated to the back, or like maybe they just run a box score or whatever. So, I think about it more from the side of the mid majors, right? Like what it means for you when you don't get called up. Cause Texas still, even though they didn't get to go to the SEC, they were still Texas, right? Everybody still wanted them. Like, they were fending off the Pac, I guess the Pac-10 at the time. Even as they didn't go to the SEC, about a decade or so ago. So like, I think that those schools, it's obviously great for them. And I'm kind of even though it hurts my school, TCU, and a lot of the schools I care about, like, to your point, Bryan, like, I'm actually excited to see these big helmet games, right? Like Texas versus Georgia. Like, I always got frustrated. I was like, man, LSU is right next door. Like, why don't these schools play each other more? You know what I mean? Like, and so like now we're going to get to see those games. And I think that, like, on the whole, for college football fans, particularly in the SEC, it's going to be a much more exciting brand of football. Like, you won't have to watch Texas go to, Baylor. I mean, no disrespect to Baylor, or maybe all the disrespect to Baylor. But like, I would much rather see Texas play Georgia than have to like play, Rice going forward.
Or JJ Joe. He'd really taken some,
man,
Baylor. No, and this is the weird part. I mean, Texas to me weirdly is kind of just a one-off example here, because they're both joining the super conference and they're restoring old rivalries that have been taken away. So they're almost just a completely, strange organism in this whole realignment kind of thing. But I think it is worth mentioning. There's a lot of bad stuff happening here, right? There's a lot of teams you're going to look at your schedule and be like, I don't like this. I don't recognize this. This isn't good. Football teams that have been left out of the whole super conference scramble. And then on the other hand, you're going to be like, oh my God, I'm on ESPN right now, and there's like 3 great games today that I want to watch that wouldn't have existed last year. And I think when people write about this, they often tend to focus on one or the other, where in fact, college football this year is going to be a lot of great in terms of helmet games. It's going to be a lot of weird, and it's going to be a lot of like, ugh. This sucks. This isn't what I wanted, especially if I'm a fan of one of those schools that was left out.
Maybe
Well, Josh, do you care as an LSU fan? Do you care about like having Texas and OU in the SEC? Like, does it really do anything for you all to have those two schools in your conference now?
No, not particularly. I think that LSU was already playing Florida and Alabama every year, and those felt like big games, and Auburn as well. And so like it felt like it was a good mix of cupcakes and entrees, whatever the opposite of a cupcake is. So, and you know, the change on LSU's schedule this year is they're a little bit anomalous because they have Oklahoma coming to Tiger Stadium, which, okay, that's exciting. But they're also playing both USC and UCLA for some reason. So it's like they're also maybe in the Big Ten or in like some like mutant alternate universe Pac-12. So I don't think I will be getting used to this for another couple of years because of the LSU of it all just feels so anomalous. But I want to ask you about, Bryan, is this thing that happened within the last few weeks that I think made an enormous number of headlines in Texas and maybe nowhere else, which is Texas A&M losing in the final game of the College World Series. Their coach, Jim Schlossnagle, yelling at a reporter about how he dared to ask if he was going to Texas, and then him going to Texas the next day. And so is the SEC part of it, is the fact that Texas and Texas A&M are now like jammed together in a way that I think neither of them actually wanted? Is it creating, did it create this like thing that we just happened in college baseball? Is it going to create more kind of awkward, amazing, hilarious, and like profoundly unsettling moments in the years to come?
Yes. I mean, you guys all know your schools have moments that are the best moments you've ever felt, win a national championship, win a major bowl game, like that are just top of the mountain. There are also top of the mountain message board days, which are distinct from those. And Texas hiring the A&M baseball coach the day after the College World Series was definitely a top message board day, maybe top 3 ever. And I'll add the data point, Josh, that Texas's coach got fired on the day of the final, which the Aggies were already like, you're stepping on our spotlight by firing your coach today, taking our headlights. So it was just kind of hovering there. No, I think it is. And let me tell you, there's SEC rules about transfers that I could not totally explain to you in 30 seconds here. But think of the transfer portal stuff. Like everything becomes more freighted.
Yeah.
Now, when you're all in this big super conference.
Also, Schlossnagle, former TCU baseball coach.
Yeah. That's right.
That was great. It's great. That was the best the TCU had ever been, right? So we lost an A&M. So I don't feel really sorry for the Aggies. But as a fan of the game, like, I'm really just interested to see like what's going to happen with Texas and Oklahoma and if they're going to maintain sort of that patina of like supremacy, right? Like, I mean, they've always just been the big dogs, no matter where they've been, even when they didn't perform up to the level that you would have expected, right? And how will fans of all of these programs deal with it when they go 8-4 every year? Because that's the NFL.
Well, 8-4 is like, for a lot of these teams, like 5-7 is on the table. Like,
yeah,
I mean, somebody's going to
8-4 might get you into the 12-team playoff, right? If you're those 4 losses are the right losses.
Some like really prestige program is going to have to go 4-8 or 5-7 every year. Like that's just how the math works. Like someone has to lose these games.
You could not explain to me like why South Carolina or Kentucky or Tennessee, like why they wanted these schools in the league. Because I'm like, what possible good does it do? Like, you've got plenty of money. Like, why do you want to fall down further in the pecking order behind these schools? Or like OU, for instance. Like, I'm really going to be curious to see what happens to OU. Because OU has always sort of outperformed like where they are. Like, the reason that OU is great at football is because they took to integration in a way that UT did not early, like with the Barry Switzer era, right? Like they took the integration earlier and they've always sort of benefited off of that. But now, like all that sort of leveling out, and I'm just like, man, like y'all have had it pretty good. I mean, they've won 14 Big 12 football championships in like the last, 20 some odd years. I'm like, are y'all going to be cool, like going down to LSU and getting your head beat in? Like, is that what you really guys wanted for yourselves?
I can't wait to see Joel's Twitter threads on college football Saturdays, which really is the highlight of my entire year.
I can't wait to make fun of everybody. Like, really, I mean, the big thing for me, I just like to see everybody miserable if possible. And that's what I'm in it for, you know?
Amen.
All right. Read Bryan Curtis at The Ringer. Listen to him on the Press Box podcast. And Bryan, before you go, you got to chant for us. Just try it on for size. Let's hear it.
Oh my God. I've never actually done this. So it's gonna be kind of awkward. SCC. Still feels weird.
Well, you'll lock it in 3 to 5 years. That is all for this episode, but we've also got a bonus episode that's live right now where we discuss the terrifying specter of an AI Al Michaels. To hear it, subscribe to Slate Plus on Apple Podcasts by clicking Try Free at the top of our show page, or visit slate.com/Hang Up Plus to get access wherever you listen. The episode is available right now. We'll see you there. Our show notes are at slate.com/hangup, and you can email us at hangup@slate.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Our producer is Kevin Bendis. For Joel Anderson and Bryan Curtis, I'm Josh Levin. Remember Zalmo Beatty, and thanks for listening.